North Carolina, in the last video we talked about, we're going to start looking what happened with North Carolina during this period. You know, in 1776 through about 1800, we had the Articles of Confederation, then we had our Constitution, and North Carolina was all a part of that, and just like most of the other states, just trying to get settled and get established. But what was going on for North Carolina until about 1800 to 1820? North Carolina overall was an anti-federalist state. They did not want a big government. They did not want government telling them what to do. Felt state rights should always be more important than what the federal government says. Republican simplicity, the idea of citizens live simply and independently. They run their own lives. The government is not involved. This was a political phraseology, you would say, at the time, talking about promoting just a simple life, Republican simplicity. North Carolina was hardly impacted by the War of 1812. It was mostly fought up in the New England, up by Canada. There was the embargo around the coast and with the Native Americans. And so it didn't have much of an impact on North Carolina. But after the war, many people left the state. North Carolina, again, we talked about, you know, it wasn't the best farming land when you got out of the coastal plain, and a lot of people said, shoot, let's just leave North Carolina, and they left it in droves. Go out there for better land, greater opportunity in the land west of the Appalachians. And that happened until gold was found in Cabarrus County in our mountains. And there became the first gold rush in the United States here in North Carolina. Didn't last that long, but it was a significant event here for North Carolina. The capital was finally moved to Raleigh. It had been in New Bern, and where you have Pamlico Sound, you had those two groups, Albemarle Sound Group, they're kind of fighting each other. They try and establish the capital of New Bern, and there were too many people living out west to have to come to the coast, so they decided to move it to Raleigh, to more of a centralized location. The first and best university, may I say, was established in North Carolina, the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. It was established very early in our country's history. And it is still the premier university in North Carolina, may I say. North Carolina was and continued to be kind of backward after the War of 1812. It mostly small, poorer farmers, except for the ones along the coast, the large plantations. Most of the money was at the coast. And there wasn't a lot of education. It just was really a backward state. One of the major political reformers for North Carolina, Archibald Murphy, looked at the state and said, we're falling behind. We really need to implement some reforms to really catch up. So he said, in order for us to do that, since we didn't have a good river system to move goods from one place to another to sell them, he really made some internal improvements. Canals for better transportation was very important. He said, educationally, we need to keep up with it. He created these common schools that were paid by taxpayer support. They were not private schools. He created a state literary fund. He knew that to have a literate population was the key to a successful government. People who could read and think critically. And so Archibald Murphy really pushed these. The North Carolina capital burned down. State's economy is in a depressed state, and many people were leaving the state. Even though Archibald was pushing these things, North Carolina was just kind of stuck. It wasn't really moving forward, and it was kind of known as the Rip Van Winkle state, kind of just staying where it's at while the rest of the world is moving on with new inventions and better transportation and new discoveries. And North Carolina is just kind of doing the same old thing. So state leaders decided to have a state convention, and they said, you know, we need to shake this up. We got to rewrite our state constitution like we, as a nation, said Articles of Confederation doesn't work, so we have to make a new constitution. We need to shake it up, and we need to create clear representation across the state and kind of make our state grow, make our state keep up. After the War of 1812, and people began to rush to get the best land in our Blue Ridge Mountains, there was an Indian tribe that covered a huge, vast area of land, and part of it was in our Blue Ridge Mountains, and they were the Cherokee. Now, the Cherokee had lived there for thousands of years, but President Jackson, well, first of all, people wanted their land, so they were just taking it. And the Cherokee went to the courts, and they did lawsuits, and they lost. And so, because the courts legally said, no, you've lost your rights, President Jackson was convinced the Cherokee, sign this treaty, people want your land, we'll give you new land out west. We'll give you a homeland out west, you're not missing your homeland, it's just going to be in a different place, which is kind of crazy when you think of what your home is. And so President Jackson convinced the Cherokee to agree to this. Cherokee, though they may have agreed to it on paper, how they were moved was inexcusable. They sent the army in, forcibly just pulled people from their homes, forced them to walk mile after mile into these holding encampments, no shelter, no bathrooms, little food, out in the elements, the rain, the snow. Many, many died. Then forced them to walk hundreds of miles to their new homeland, their location. Very poor conditions, many, many, many died, and that is called the Trail of Tears. We will be looking at a lot of these things much more in depth, but this is just a bigger overview. That is pretty much the end of this time period with North Carolina. Bring your notes into class, and we'll be working on some other things.